Just as a matter of reminder, I have a few tests left over. Pick them up after class if you would like. Today we're going to start kind of doing something a little bit different. We have been talking about mating, the cues for mating and mate selection and that sort of thing. But we've got to move on to sort of like the next part of that, which is going to be related to how the male and female parents are involved in raising the young. And they do this in a variety of ways. They have different what are called mating systems. That's what we're going to talk about for today and into next week. And we kind of know about mating systems. We know, for example, the thing that we at least think we're most familiar with is monogamy, where one male appears with one female, and they're socially connected somehow, and they do things that make it likely for them to raise offspring. They might defend a territory together. They might forage together, feed one another, something like that. They may produce babies and raise them together. Monogamy, okay? And that's going to turn out to be something that has a bit more complexity than just two individuals getting together to raise babies or something like that. But the contrasting kind of mating system, monogamy is not a mating system. Contrasting kind of mating system is polygamy. Okay. Monogamy means one mate. So monogamy refers to mate. So they each have one mate. Okay. Polygamy means many mates. Okay. The kind of polygamy that is the most common and what we think of when we call stuff polygamy is actually polygyny. Okay. This means many females. And this is the common case of polygamy, where there's a male with multiple females, many females. Polygyny. Which is the sort of breeding system that we really mean when we use the term polygamy. The opposite of that is polyandry, which means many males. Okay. In this case, you have one female who is socially bonded to multiple male partners. Okay. And they do the things that monogamous mating systems do. They produce young and take care of them in some fashion. This is far less common, but it's it's really interesting. So we'll spend a little time talking about that. Just to kind of keep things, I don't know, maybe keep the terminology complete. There's also polygynandry, which just means many females and males. Okay. In this case, there's two or more females who socially bond to two or more males. Okay, and they mate with each other in that social group, and they raise them. There's this polygynandrous mating system. Now, these are situations where males are bonded to females in some way. This is to be distinguished from promiscuity. Okay? And polygynandry, although there's multiple females and multiple males involved in this, is not promiscuity. Promiscuity is basically no male socially bonded to anything, and maybe just kind of like multiple females mating with a single male or multiple males mating with a single female. But the key thing here is that there's no real social bond. They're not doing something together. Now, one of the most remarkable things, I think, is that there's a really big difference in the mating systems of birds and mammals. So birds are 90% of the time, in terms of number of species of birds, are monogamous, at least socially monogamous. There's a pair of birds, a male and a female, get together and do whatever they do. They, guard a territory, female lays the eggs, one or the other or both take care of the babies and so on. Okay. Monogamy. 10% are polygynous. Okay. In mammals, it's the reverse. 90% of mammals are polygynous. Not polyandrous, not polygynandrous, but polygynous. One male, multiple females. Okay. And about 10% of them, a minority, are monogamous. Because this is such a really big difference between birds and mammals in terms of what their mating system is. And because birds and mammals have such an enormous difference in sort of the reproductive strategies, people have often sort of thought that there may be a connection between, the fact that mammals, the female has to internally gestate young and then has to lactate to feed the newborns. Okay. While the male can't do this, males cannot participate in that sort of parental care beyond basically fertilization. Okay. So males might be freed up to do things that, like, find another mate, hence becoming polygynous. Okay. Whereas for birds, they don't suffer that sort of restriction. Once the female lays the eggs, she has to do that. She's a female. Okay. Nevertheless, it's possible for anybody, male or female, to incubate those eggs. They just sit on the eggs, and regardless of sex, they can incubate the eggs. It doesn't make any difference whether they're male or female in terms of providing food for the newborns either. Males can provide insect prey or something like that for the young baby. And so the original thought is that therefore males might be recruited much more likely to be parents of a single group of Sorry. Forget to close this down in terms of sound. Well, males and females might be able to pair up and share parenting activities. And this turns out not to be particularly true, although there is some truth to it, and we'll sort through that in just a bit here. So, 10% of mammals are monogamous, and they are not, they're monogamous in, a variety. It's not by any means a very large proportion of males, 10%. But they're not just sort of randomly scattered among mammals either. For one reason or another, and we're not going to spend a huge amount of time talking about this, these monogamous mammals show up a little bit more commonly in certain groups. The canids, dogs, tend to have a greater fraction of monogamous species. Okay. By no means all of them. I mean, dogs are not necessarily monogamous. Okay. But things like foxes sometimes are. So there's a reasonable number of canid species that are monogamous. There's actually a few groups of rodents that are monogamous. And so you end up with a certain fraction of the rodents contributing to those monogamous individuals. I mean, most mammals are rodents, so it's not surprising that most monogamous mammals are also rodents, but they tend to show up in particular groups of rodents. There are some antelope, which surprisingly enough are monogamous. These sort of very tiny antelope duikers and dickheads who are together the males and females guard small territories and raise young together. And then the primates are actually have several groups that are monogamous. We talked about this earlier with the gibbons. The gibbons are pretty much universally monogamous. There's some South American groups. TT monkeys are monogamous. Marmosets are more commonly monogamous. But it doesn't, when people have looked at this, seem to have much to do with male parental care. Okay. Those monogamous species, in those monogamous species, it doesn't look like the males have been necessarily recruited to engage in a greater amount of parental care. Instead, what seems to be happening in the monogamy of mammals is this. Whoops. We have females who form territories, and these are, in the species that are monogamous, the female territories are not like close together, they're kind of widely dispersed, widely distributed. And one male is associated with one female. The characteristics of species that are monogamous tend to include these. The females are solitary, so they have one female guarding that one territory. In some cases, a group of females might guard a territory, but in those cases, the male can guard that group of females. And then it's not monogamy anymore, it's polygyny. Okay. So you have solitary females. They defend exclusive territories, so if you imagine that there was some overlap between one female and another nearby female, then it would be possible for the male to actually overlap the territories of those two closely associated females. So instead, they tend to be widely distributed. And they're relatively small territories by females. And that depends on whether the thing you're talking about is a primate or a rodent in terms of what small means for those. So it looks like, the situations of monogamy in mammals is due to the distribution of females. Okay, and this is one of the themes that we'll return to over and over again. This is our first, observation of this, is that mating systems in organisms have a lot to do with the female's distribution of their own space use. Keep that in mind, okay, as we move along. Get to birds, yeah.
So for one male to, so to speak, bind with another female in the case that we just talked about, how do they have to recognize the other female, like visually, or just know that they exist?
They probably, I'm sure they recognize individuals. It's probably a lot of it's visual, but it's also olfactory. And especially since mammals are such an olfactory group, they're probably less recognizing a lot by sense of smell. But I'm sure they don't have any limits to the mechanisms by which they can, recognize their partner. Okay. Now, let's go to birds, where 90% of birds are at least socially monogamous. And as I said, it's possible for males to contribute to parental care almost as much as females. Okay. They don't always contribute equally to parental care. Most cases, it's a little bit less than females do. In some cases, it's pretty much all the parental care is done by males. But in other cases, pretty much all the parental care is done by females. But usually, it's some combination of the two. In birds, generally, it looks like there is something that is associating the kind of mating system that they have, monogamy, with the degree of parental care. Okay, so that males are actually the fact that males are participating in parental care is important to this monogamous breeding system. Let's take a look at juncos. This is an experiment where you have, let's see, 3 or 4 hatchlings in a particular junco nest. Okay, and what they did in this experiment is that they captured the males, they capture the males, and in the control birds, they put one of those capsules underneath the skin of the male. Okay, and the other, in the experimental males, they put one of those capsules that actually is releasing testosterone, under the skin of the male. So we have the ones that don't, where that capsule doesn't have any testosterone in it. Okay, it doesn't affect the male's behavior. They continue to engage in parental care. Those groups of offspring are cared for by 2 parents. Those that have had the capsule but it contains testosterone, getting a testosterone boost, okay, they start doing things like singing, being aggressive, courting other females, and they stop doing things like taking care of young. Okay, so this is a group of hatchlings that are not raised by one, but by 2, not by 2, but by 1 parent. Okay. Make sense? So, taking the same, they were both going to be parents, but we've removed the parental behavior by one of the pair. Mortality is much higher when the offspring are raised by a single parent. At 6 days, what is it? 75% of the hatchlings are surviving. 25% have died in the first week, so that's pretty substantial mortality. But there's 60% have died after 1 week when there's only a single parent. And in this case, nobody actually survived when they were raised by a single parent. In case of 4 hatchlings, see the same sort of pattern. There's greater survival when there's 2 parents than when there's a single parent. But whatever that is, 10% or something like that of the offspring did actually survive when there was only a single parent, was only female parental care. Okay. So the mortality is much higher when there is only a single parent as opposed to 2 parents. If these juncos are really successful, they bring off a clutch of babies and those babies leave. In some cases, or many cases, the pair will lay a new set of eggs and raise a second clutch of eggs. Okay, and then that allows them kind of to double their reproductive success. But the female has to mate with the male. Okay, when she actually has help from her male mate, okay, she will remate with him. Okay. When she doesn't have help, she just chooses a different male. Her choice of mating, it is actually forcing the parental care on males, because otherwise he gets very little reproductive success from those mates, but he also doesn't get any future reproductive success. Okay, so monogamy is kind of enforced by the females here, and it is actually something that males are performing in order to sort of increase their reproductive success. Males are actually making a big difference to the reproductive output of both members of the pair. Does that make sense? So this is one species. If you take a look at other species, these sorts of experiments have been done in other cases. Let me show you this video clip here.
Superb fairy He is an attentive male, courting his female with little gifts of food. But there are other males around, identifiable by the different rings on their legs. One of them dances for her, flaring the blue fans on his cheeks. Yet another male is also flirting with her. And here's another. And she selects one of them. But her first established male is not around to see all this. He is visiting a female neighbor, and what is more, he's carrying a bouquet, a flower petal, something he never does at home. And his flashy courtship behavior pays off too. Now he's back beside his own nest and with his first mate, looking after the chicks that the nest now contains. So, the female fairy wren chooses the flashiest males to father her chicks, and allows her partner only just enough matings to ensure that he helps feed the family. And the males, while they may have chicks in as many as 6 nests around here, may not have a single one in the nest that they actually tend.
That's kind of the extreme, okay? But there is a relationship between the sort of extent of monogamy and how much paternal care matters. One lesson of this, and this graph that we'll go through, is that monogamy is not just a qualitative thing. You're either monogamous or not. There's degrees of monogamy. Okay, there are some pairs where the pair are exclusively mating with one another. Okay. And there are other situations, like in the superb fairy wren, where there's a lot more breakdown of that sort of social monogamous bond. Okay. This is a graph of how much the male contributes to parental care. And this is kind of like the information that we saw with the juncos. It's when you remove the male from parental care from this pair, how much of a reduction in reproductive success is there? So for, like, I don't know, juncos, you remove the male, then you lose about 100%. Actually, you don't lose quite 100%, but it's some pretty high fraction of the reproductive success of that pair. Okay? On the y-axis here is the rate of EPP. This means extra pair paternity. Okay? And so you'll see this abbreviation used, extra pair paternity. Extra pair paternity is caused by extra pair offspring, EPOs. Okay? So these are offspring that are not from that particular paired group of birds. Okay? EPOs. And EPOs result from EPCs, which are extra pair copulations. So you'll see all of those sort of traits. So both males and females, in order to have an extra pair copulation, they're both having a copulation outside of whatever pair bond they have. Those might result in extra pair offspring, okay? And result in sort of a rate of extra pair paternity, if you're looking at it from the male's point of view. So here we have the rate of extra pair paternity, and it goes from 0 to 60%. I think this might actually be the superb prairie wrens. I mean, they're a real extreme example. Birds are described as socially monogamous, and that's, it depends on how you look at monogamy. If monogamy is only 100% of the offspring produced in that pair, it's only like 3 that are 100% offspring within the pair bond, and 0% of the offspring that are extra pair paternity. But it's also true that there's a substantial fraction that are 90 or 80% of the offspring are produced within that pair. Okay. But if you look at this, those that have the greatest contribution, or have the greatest contribution, where the males make the greatest contribution to parental care. You remove the male, the offspring, the number of offspring just goes down to near zero. Okay. Those are situations where the rate of extra pair paternity is very low. In cases where the extra pair paternity is much higher, the males make much less difference to the reproductive output of that pair. Okay, so if the male doesn't really matter much because he doesn't really contribute much to parental care, then that's also a signal that there's likely to be a lot of extra pair paternity. Does that make some sense? So in a sense, this is kind of relating, parental care, particularly paternal care, to the mating system. Those that have the greatest contribution to parental care are actually associated with much more strict monogamy. Those that have less of a sort of contribution to parental care also probably engage in extra pair copulations, EPCs. Make some sense? Okay, we're going to take this apart a little bit more in detail in juncos. These juncos have been studied in this particular population, the same population that had the testosterone implants, for decades, and they know, and they've taken genetic samples, blood samples, and genotype, parents and offspring and potential parents of offspring, and they know who is mom and who is dad for everybody going back generations. So they're really good demographic study here. And this is what it looks like in terms of the mating, in terms of the number of offspring that are produced by a male junco, okay, as a function of the number of mates that he has. Okay, we've seen this kind of graph before when we were looking at rough-skinned newts. If the male has one partner, he has a certain number of offspring, 2 partners more, 3 partners even more. Okay. This is like the greater payoff for males to having more partners, sort of less. If you look at females, it does the same sort of thing. The female has 1 mate, has a certain number of offspring. She has 2 mates more, 3 mates even more. Okay. So what's going on here? And just to emphasize that there is in a pair of juncos, okay, that actually do things like defend a territory, build a nest, feed the young. Okay. But it's also clear that there are extra pair copulations by both males and females that are increasing the reproductive success of both sexes. In fact, it looks like this. So what we're looking at here is the total number of F2 offspring. Okay, so it's not, so you have a pair, they have offspring, and we're looking at the offspring of those offspring. So that's F1 and F2. Okay? Clear about that? Okay, so it's the number of grand offspring. Okay? Their offspring might be either produced within that pair bond. They are within pair offspring. They're the orange ones. Or those offspring might be extra pair offspring. They're the F1s. So we're looking at the number of offspring produced by either within pair offspring or extra pair offspring. When you look at it for both sexes, there are, if the F1s, if their offspring were produced extra pair, they produce more offspring than if their offspring were within pair. Okay? And this is true for both females and males. So for males, there's a big difference here. The male, the offspring of the male's offspring who are extra pair have much greater reproductive success than those offspring that are within pair. And it's also true for females. Yeah.
Okay, so the males who produce offspring via extra pair, those offspring have more reproductive success with extra pair as well?
Than the within pair offspring. Let's go through this. In fact, these data are the same as these data, and we'll explain what these data are in just a second. But let's take a look at how this works. Okay. Here we have a pair, male and female junco. Okay. Now, this female junco might have an extra pair mate, and she's going to engage in extra pair copulations and so on. But we have, and they'll produce extra pair offspring. She will lay eggs that are sired by a male that's not the one that she's paired with. So we have here a pair, okay? And we have an extra pair partner, okay? Now, of course, focusing here on the female pairing with an extra pair male, but it also is true that this male is pairing with an extra pair female, okay? And that's then precisely the same as this circumstance. So you don't have to kind of like build in everything. But you have the possibility of having offspring that are produced, male offspring, female offspring, okay, that are produced within the pair bond. So these are within pair offspring. Okay. This male and this female, sons and daughters. Okay. They pair up the females in the infants, and when they form pairs in the next generation, and they have some opportunity for extra pair mating, extra pair population, extra pair offspring. Okay. But all of those offspring, to start with, are within pair. They came from within pair production by this particular pair of juncos. Okay? But there can also be extra pair offspring. Extra pair male, extra pair female. Okay? Those males and females go on about their business and they pair up with females and males. Okay? And they form, a mated pair. But they also have extra pair offspring or extra pair copulations. Okay? These are extra pair, but both of these offspring, the males and the females, these sons and daughters, are extra pair. Now, the within pair, the female mates with the male and she lays an egg in the nest and everything's cool. But when the female mates with an extra pair male, okay, she still lays an egg in her nest. Okay, so the egg is still where the female lives. Okay. Does that make sense? Just to sort of clarify this. Okay. We have like 8 different outcomes here. So this is why it's complicated. complicated, and so it's kind of like worth spending some time kind of working through this. Okay, you have offspring, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's different kinds of offspring that come from different sorts of past mating experiences. Okay, but what we saw in that first graph was that the number of offspring that come from extra pair, these extra pair progeny, is greater than the number that comes from the within pair progeny. That's what those bars, those blue and orange bars. Okay, fair enough? Let's kind of look at this in detail here. So here are the males. And the black or hollow bars are birds that were in that F1 generation, extra pair or within pair offspring. Okay, so these are the 4 bars that refer to the male reproductive output. Okay. From those within pair or extra pair offspring. And you can see that if the bird was originally extra pair, it has a greater reproductive success than those that were within pair. Okay? These black bars are taller than the white bars. Okay. But the biggest difference is that the extra pair birds, the extra pair's original sons, really have a lot of extra pair offspring of their own. So those birds that were produced extra pair, those males that produced extra pair, have a lot of extra pair offspring of their own. Okay. Females, it's a bit different. The dark bars are not necessarily obviously bigger than the white bars overall, okay, but what's really different is that those extra pair female offspring that are produced are really good at producing within pair offspring. Those males that are extra pair produced are really good at producing extra pair offspring. Those females that are extra pair produced are really good at producing within pair offspring. The males here that are extra pair produced are really successful at producing more extra pair offspring. And those females that are extra pair produced are really good at producing within pair. But the overall result, when you add up within extra pair offspring, is that the extra pair offspring are just more valuable than the within pair offspring. How do we think of this? So we might have to think about this differently than males and females because there's a different result here for males and females. One of the possibilities is that, just ask yourself, why is this female have an extra pair mating with this male? Okay, why would she do this? And it seems that she has a greater success when she can produce offspring from this extra pair mating. One possibility is that there is something that really makes the difference between the quality of the male that she's mating with and the quality of the male that she is taking the opportunity to populate with. Okay. She could be trading up, okay, in terms of quality. That she's paired monogamously with this male, but this male she judges somehow to not be as high quality, whatever that means, as the male that she's paired with. Okay. She would mate with that male because he's going to provide better genes, maybe. Or perhaps he's going to end up producing male sons that have those traits that make them very desirable to other females. This is something that's called the sexy son hypothesis. That these are sort of sexy sons, because whatever it is that dad had, the sons have, and that's going to increase the rate of extra pair copulations by the female, by her son. Okay. It could be that she's trading up in quality, not just for attractiveness of this, to perpetuate the attractiveness of her sons, but perhaps because he has other high qualities somehow. And one of the things that you'd expect for this is that if the greater the fraction of extra pair matings that you occur in a particular case, the higher, more likely it is that she would choose to mate with that male. Okay. And so if a female regards this male that she's mated with as the highest quality male, okay, she's not going to have many extra pair of offspring because there's not other males that are going to be better than the males she's mated with. It doesn't have to be male quality. It could be male quality in terms of how they are, whether they appeal to other females. It could be something that the male is providing for traits that are good for, females in terms of raising offspring, parental care, or, turning resources into offspring, so that when she mates with an extra pair male, those are females who are higher quality because the male is higher quality. And he's providing something that makes it more likely for him, for her, to produce more within pair offspring.
So for the extra pair of male, does he also provide for his offspring?
He does within pair.
No, for like the extra pair on top. Then the female mates with the extra pair male. Does he provide for his children?
No. No, the extra pair males, so the eggs are laid within her nest, and she's going to be, he's mated with another female over here, and he would probably be, helping to raise those offspring, those within pair offspring, but not the extra pair offspring. Yeah, exactly. In some cases, you could have the possibility that there's some sort of genetic incompatibility that goes on between males and females. I mean, you could have a mating between two individuals where, one of them has a particular allele that is kind of incompatible with the female's allele, and so there's some amount of genetic incompatibility between, the male that you're paired with. Okay. In order to avoid that genetic incompatibility, you might want to have a few extra pair matings to avoid that sort of a situation. In which case, then this is not necessarily the best male. It's just a male that's better for you because you're not as genetically incompatible. This male might be, genetically incompatible with his female. Okay, so those are not. He's not sort of overall higher quality. There's just the male-female are sort of genetically incompatible. So extra pair copulations are one way of sort of getting rid of this sort of the possibility that if you're genetically incompatible with the male that you're mated with, you lose everything. Could be that the female does something, it's not the male, the female's doing something to provide extra benefits to her extra pair of offspring. Females provide lots of stuff when they lay a big egg. You know, there's a lot of stuff that's going on inside that yolk. It's not just a gamete. Okay, there's nutritive. There's a lot of messenger RNA that's packed in there, and it's known that females provide differential resources to their extra-pair offspring compared to their within-pair offspring. Okay. So this could be a female sort of manipulation thing, where the females are providing resources that are going to generate males and females that are just higher quality. Offspring of males and females are just higher quality. Yeah. Yeah.
So, where are you trying to go with this?
Yeah, so the lesson here, the lesson is that sort of, these are monogamous critters, okay? There's a male and a female that are pair bonded to one another. They do a lot of these things together. They look like monogamous things. But there's obviously a considerable amount of leakage in this sort of monogamous pair bond, okay?
Are these the degrees of monogamy that you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, there's not like a percentage on this, but you can see that there's differing ways of being, you know, non-monogamous here.
Okay.
And this is really relevant. So the monogamy, though it seems simple, one male mates with one female, they pair up, they raise babies, end of story, except that's not even the beginning of the end of the story. Okay? In fact, what's going on is all of this stuff at the same time. So monogamy is not, I mean, that's kind of the meta lesson here, is that monogamy is not just one male, one female, their babies. It's also a lot of interactions between individuals that sometimes stay within those pair bonds, but sometimes, you know, go outside of those pair bonds. So monogamy is not a simple thing. There's Okay, let's call it quits. Has enough, please. Okay, what's the deal? What is that? What is that stuff? Post-calculatory call business.
Isn't it the call that they give out like after meeting? It's similar to the alarm call, and it immobilizes, like both of them will immobilize like the ring.
Yeah, exactly. Remember that? The roast and the squirrel. Anything over here?
It was squirrels.
It was squirrels.
Does a prairie dog look like a squirrel?
No, but, I don't care that you identified the organism. This is what, it's kind of what this is about.
Okay.
But they were, prairie dogs are ground squirrels, so, maybe,
I'll make a note.
yeah. Okay, so, enough about monogamy. Monogamy is not as simple as it looks, and there's, a lot of times that sort of, those offspring that are produced outside of those monogamous pure bond are actually, they kind of are pretty good in some cases. We're going to talk about polygyny next. And we're going to talk about 3 different kinds of polygyny. That, what happens with these kinds of polygyny is that one male has multiple female partners, but they do this in, extremely different ways. And so they're, we can call them polygyny, but it's really important to distinguish the different types of polygyny. So female defense polygyny is like the thing where iconically it's elephant seals. Okay? You have a big male who monopolizes a group of females. Okay. Defense polygyny, he's not defending the females from anything. He's just defending those females from another male who might want to mate with those females. Okay? So there's no protection involved. It's just he's trying to monopolize those females. And this is a place, this is a circumstance where you end up with that most extreme difference in the maximum male and maximum female reproductive success. So this male, this beach master here, is able to monopolize these females mating access. Okay, so he gets babies from all of those females. Okay. These males get 0 babies. Okay. This sort of polygyny occurs when the females are gathered together in large, medium, or whatever, they're gathered together in groups for some other reason. It isn't about mating, it's for something else. Okay. In the case of like elephant seals, so they're an aquatic mammal, but they're not a perfectly aquatic mammal, so they have to come ashore to give birth. Okay, and that's why they are there in a big group. They're hauling out on these beaches for giving birth in particular places. And certain beaches are good for this, because they're protected from predators, and other beaches are not good. Okay? So they tend to concentrate in particular places. While they're there giving birth, they also engage in mating, because they're otherwise off into the ocean and they may not see each other. Okay? So elephant seals also, like many mammals, but particularly seals, they have something that's called postpartum estrus. So female gives birth. She's been pregnant, she gives birth. Right after giving birth, she comes into estrus, okay? And mates. And this is something that happens because there are a bunch of them there together on the beach at the same time. Why not, handle mating and birth at the same place and time? Yes. Estrus. Let's see. Here. A lot of mammals do this.
Is it like a fertile window or something like
Yes,
that?
yeah, that's when they can mate. Okay, so, pregnancy is not really compatible with producing more babies from mating, and neither is lactation usually. So when a mammal is lactating, they usually don't come into estrus. Humans, lactational amenorrhea, menstruate during lactation. But in a lot of things, they have this postpartum estrus, where they come into estrus right after giving birth and before they do much of the lactation, okay? Pregnancy is really not compatible with lactation. The hormonal situations are really incompatible. But what happens is they mate, the fertilization takes place, like blastula, kind of floats around for a few months until the offspring get to be mature enough to wean, and then the embryo implants. Okay, so they're technically pregnant for a very long period of time, throughout the entire lactation period and beyond. But there's not an active pregnancy until lactation ceases. Postpartum estrus. So as a consequence, when these females come up and there's pups around all over the place, those females have also probably mated, and they've mated with a male that can actually monopolize the reproductive access of all the females in that group. Okay, and that's why it's called female defense position. These are red deer.
So it's safer for them to do this because.
Well, so the key here is that the females are going to come out. So let's remove males from the situation.
Okay.
Okay, the females are going to come out into this group
Yeah.
because this is a good place to raise a baby, give birth and raise the babies. Okay, so the females are in a group. Now we have to introduce males into it, and now the males can defend that group of, monopolize that group of females. So this is another case. This is the second one here, where we're looking at the mating system of this, elephant seal is dictated by the spatial distribution of the females. The females are doing this for a totally different reason. They're not doing it for mating, really. They're doing it because this is a good place to give birth. Okay. Mix that with postpartum estrus, and then you also have female defense position. Does that make some sense? A lot of mammals that form herds, which is a lot of mammals, are sort of susceptible to this sort of thing. So this is a red deer. They're red deer in Europe. They're elk in North America. They're basically the same organism. There are herds of elk that persist, and they're good to be in herds because they're more protected from predators, and they might have greater protection against bad weather, and they can find food better. There's a whole series of things that make living in groups advantageous. But if the females are living in groups, then potentially that group of females can be monopolized by a single male. Okay, the red deer stag here. Okay, and then there's there's competition, intense competition among males to be the male that is in charge of, can actually monopolize that group of red deer. Or among the males that can monopolize that group of elephant seals. The ones that actually get control of that herd or that group of elephant seals have enormous reproductive success, so it's extremely advantageous. So you end up with the development of those elaborate weaponry and tactics for fighting male-male competition. That makes some sense? So. This is the roaring display or eagle bugling. An elk bugling. It's supposedly very stimulating. Okay. It's actually pretty easy. In some sense, it's an easy sort of polygyny to understand. But the essential point here is that the female distribution, female spatial distribution, okay, is what causes female defense polygyny. Resource defense polygyny. Polygyny type 2. Here's an example. It'll kind of introduce what we want to think about with resource defense polygyny. These are reed warblers. A lot of them are in the genus Acrocephalus A here. Doesn't matter. Pretty drab, undistinguished birds. Most of them, many of them, are monogamous. Okay, single male pairs with a single female. Okay. But there are instances where there's a single male who has 2, 3, 4 female partners. Okay, so there's some sort of polygyny. Those are shown by the symbol. It's a triangle here. The monogamous ones are the circles. Okay. And then there's one species that is promiscuous. It's a square one where there's multiple males and multiple females that are all just kind of meeting with each other and so on. There are also, and this is a critical thing here, differences in the resources that are available to these birds. In most cases, the resources are, I'm not going to say bad, but they're modest. Okay, they're not hugely productive locations for these warblers to raise young. And those are just indicated by the things that they don't have any shade. A lot of them have just sort of like, okay, territories. In others, the territory is much better. Okay, it's a much richer habitat, more resources for whatever they're using, insects, and therefore there's going to be, a lot more available food. Okay, in cases where there's monogamy, there's so little food, maybe, that really both parents are required in order to raise young. Okay. You really have to have both parents. In the better habitats, it's possible for just the female, because it's a better habitat, it's possible for just the female to bring in enough food that she can raise the young. And in pretty much every case where they are polygynous, where there's one male with multiple female partners, those are associated with habitats that are more highly productive. Okay, habitats that are just better. It doesn't happen here, but it happens for every case that is a triangle. It's also a better habitat. And the best habitat of all is the one where there's promiscuity. The idea being that if one sex can actually provide enough resources to produce to produce offspring successfully, then they don't need help from the other sex. They don't need help from the males. So the males can then go off and find other females. So they end up being polygynous. They're polygynous because those males then are defending territories that are particularly good. Okay. Make some sense? How do we think about that? We're going to measure the reproductive output of a female, okay, that is trying to decide whether to go into a good, a medium, or a poorer habitat, okay? And the more females there are in those habitats, the lower their reproductive output is going to be, because that food, whatever it is in that particular territory, is going to have to be split among not just one, but up to whatever it is here, 8 females. Okay? So the first female who's making a choice of where to go is going to go here and occupy this territory. Second female still does better, being the second female in the territory than she would be the first female in either of these other territories. This is starting to seem familiar, I hope. Third female, fourth, female. Now we're starting to get more and more distribution of individuals. Now we finally got somebody who is willing to be in the worst territory. Okay. Let's add a couple more. And we're left with, I don't know, however many females we put into these 3 territories. Different numbers of females in these territories. In the end, everybody ends up with the same sort of reproductive output. This is the ideal free distribution. Okay. It's exactly the same reasoning that we talked about before with like habitat selection. In this case, it's females choosing to occupy a territory inherited by this male, or that male, or this male. All those males are polygynous. This one has 7 mates, 5 mates, and 3 mates. So when we make some predictions here, the first is that the best territory, and how do we identify the best territory? It's the one that has the most females. Okay. That one will be occupied first by females. If there's a opportunity for the females to kind of come in sort of one at a time. Second is that payoff for the females should be equal, regardless of density. Okay, that's the conclusion that we had with the ideal free distribution as well. And the third thing is that the payoff for males will increase with density, because he has 7, and he has 3 mates. So the payoff for the females, stays the same. Okay. So let's test those predictions using red-wing blackbirds, which are probably what this was designed to predict. These are birds that are around here. You may have seen them. They occupy a lot of freshwater marshes around here. They're migratory. The males usually arrive a bit earlier in the year, in the spring, than females do. Males come in, and they try to set up territories, and they succeed in setting up territories. They are very aggressive to one another, and they display, and they call loudly, and there's a lot of competition among males for particular places. These are locations that have the greatest number of, later in the spring, they'll have the greatest number of insects available to the females. They don't necessarily look that much different, but some areas have more vegetation, some have less vegetation, some have exactly the right amount of vegetation that's going to be a greater production of these aquatic insects that the females go after. There she's got one. And they arrive, the males kind of arrive, set up the territories, and then the females arrive. Okay? And they kind of arrive over a period of a few weeks, and they take up residence in one of those mixed territories. So you have the situation where females are arriving and successively choosing to mate with, or choosing to set up nests in territories. And this is what you see. This is the date of the first egg, which is an indication of when they have arrived in those territories. You know, this goes from, it's not quite a month, but it's pretty close to a month difference in terms of when the first one arrives and then the last one arrives. Okay. And you see that the one that has the greatest numbers of females tends to arrive, they tend to be there earlier, so they're showing up in the better territories first. Those that have fewer females in the territories are chosen last. They're the ones kind of at the bottom of the lowest quality. Okay. It also turns out that there's no difference here, although there's more females here, and these are in apparently better territories. They don't have any greater reproductive success in those better territories than these here in the lower quality. This is a ground squirrel that is something called the yellow-bellied marmot. It lives at sort of high elevations in western U.S. The males are polygynous. The breeding system is polygynous. The males guard territories, and the thing that they guard is sort of holes that everybody uses for hibernation. And this is kind of getting at that difference in the reproductive output of males versus females. So if the number of females in the group goes up, the number of offspring by a female really remains unchanged. But as the number of females in the group goes up, the number of offspring by males, increases as the number of females increases. Okay? The reproductive success of males, the number of offspring they produce, increases as the number of females increases. Reproductive success of males. That's kind of like an overview of resource defense polygyny. Okay? And I'm going to stop there. We'll talk about lek polygyny. And we'll talk about some other things like polyandry and polygyandry and so on Tuesday. Okay.
Dr.
Yeah.
Final for this class is just
The regular midterm, it's longer. So, and it's going to be, it's the same sort of draw on material from throughout the course. Yep.
No problem.
Yeah, you want, where are you going?
I